Good evening. March 17th, 2008 meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council, Parking Authority, and Redevelopment Agency. We can quiet down, please, and get settled. Madam Clerk, Los Gatos High School, the Los Gatos Public Library, and other local communities organizations to promote Jade Ribbon Week and hepatitis B prevention. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Barbara Spector, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do hereby proclaim March 16th through 22nd, 2008, as Jade Ribbon Week.
I'd like to thank you all for supporting Jade Ribbon Week. This is our second year doing it, and I can attest from last year we were able to touch a lot of people around the Bay Area with our Jade Ribbon Week, and I hope this year will be just as successful. Thank you so much.
I think it's from the date that they adopt the resolution finalizing this. Sure.
All right, consent items. These are items on our calendar that will be acted upon in a single motion unless anyone from the council or the audience wishes to pull one from the consent calendar. First, I'll look to council. Mr. Glickman.
Item 3, please.
All right, so item 3 and any other matter pulled from the consent calendar will be heard after other business. Does anyone in the audience wish to pull a matter from the consent calendar? Yes. Okay, 3 has already been pulled. Anything else? All right, then let me remind everybody, if you want to speak on any item, please turn in the speaker cards. At this point, I'll look to the council for a motion on the consent calendar.
Move to adopt with the exception of item 3. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski for the entire consent calendar except for 3. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, next agenda item, verbal communications. I have one card, Citizen Ray.
Good evening. Hey, it's on. Hooray. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer for your consideration tonight a couple of items. The first is the criminal actions that took place recently in the town clerk's office, where the petitions of Measure D were copied criminally by the town clerk, okay? We're waiting anxiously for word from our new DA to see whether she's got the gumption to uphold the law. Okay, particularly where our American democracy is at stake. If we don't have secret elections, we have no democracy. I hope you have the intelligence to understand that. Okay? So, again, we're waiting for the brand new Bureau of Integrity of the DA's office to do something, anything. Wait. Is this woman, this Carr woman, soft on political crime? Is she? Huge question. And the question, of course, is, was there a conspiracy? Were there others involved? Others involved that were senior to her? This is what we want to know. Next. I cannot believe it, but I need you to know that there's an appeal on your docket tonight, and the appeal form by a DiNapoli person did not pay for the transcript of the minutes of the Planning Commission. And I was required to do so when I filed an appeal just a month ago, and I refused to pay that transcription fee, and I was canceled. And here we have the DiNapoli not paying the fee, and I have the proof. I have a copy of the document, okay? No fee. What's going on? Discrimination? You're up, Mr. Larson. You are up. Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda item, we're going to go on to public hearings, and this agenda item involves property at 41 Miles Avenue. Since I live within 500 feet, I must recuse myself, and so I will be turning the gavel over to our Vice Mayor to conduct the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for being here this evening. Again, an additional reminder, if you wish to speak tonight, please make sure you turn a card into the clerk to your right. We're now on to item number 11, which is to consider an appeal of a decision by the Planning Commission approving a time extension to construct and operate a skate park on property zoned RC. We are going to start out here with a report from staff. I assume it's you, Mr. Lortz? We're going to start out with a report from Mr. Bud Lortz, our Director of Community Development. Council will then have an opportunity to ask any questions of staff that it wishes, and then the appellant will start off the public speaking portion with up to 10 minutes to speak. Mr. Lortz.
Thank you, Vice Mayor and members of the council, ladies and gentlemen. The town requested approval of a time extension to the conditional use permit to construct a skate park on approximately 12,300 square feet of town property at Miles Avenue. The site area is approximately 22,000 square feet and is used as a parking lot. The property is located immediately south of Balzer Field. The park will be enclosed by an 8-foot-high chain link fence, and a drop-off zone including 5 parking spaces will be provided along the eastern park boundary between the northeast entrance and Miles Avenue. The plans provided at this time are schematic in nature, and the details of the final design will be developed during the building permit process. The existing parking lot contains approximately 34 parking spaces. The Planning Commission considered this matter on October 24th of 2007, and then again on November 14th of 2007, at which time the Commission approved of the conditional use permit time extension. An appeal of the Planning Commission's decision was received on November 19th, 2007. The basis for the appeal is that the Commission erred or abused its discretion in that conditions have changed. The most significant issues raised during the public hearing were parking, traffic, and noise. In terms of parking, staff determined based on recent parking counts taken at the site, as well as photographs submitted by the public, that there's no new evidence to document that the existing on- and off-street parking demand along Miles Avenue is less than available is less than the available parking supply. The subject parking lot on average is not used to its fullest capacity, and 56 on-street parking spaces are available to accommodate the net loss of parking spaces. In terms of traffic, since the approval of the original application, staff estimates that there has been a decrease in daily trips on Miles Avenue. This decrease is due to the reduction of 7 full-time town employees and additional part-time town employees at the corporation yard, as well as the transfer of sanitary sewer maintenance function to West Valley Sanitation District. In terms of noise, the initial study evaluated noise from the skate park and from skateboarders accessing the park on Miles Avenue and Edelin Avenue. The study determined that the noise impact would be between 1 and 1.8 decibels respectively. In conclusion, no changes are proposed to the project and the plans meet current town requirements. The findings for granting a time extension under Section 29.20.325 do not limit the discretion of the Planning Commission in deciding whether to grant an extension, with the single exception where a new application would be legally prohibited. The Planning Commission determined that the physical and legal circumstances had not changed from the time of the original conditional use permit was approved. Consequently, the Planning Commission approved the time extension. Council may exercise its discretion in deciding this appeal pursuant to Town Code Section 29.20.300, which allows the modification or reversal of a Planning Commission decision where, number one, there was an error or abuse of discretion by the Commission, 2, new information is brought for the first time to Council, or 3, the decision involves an issue or policy over which the Commission lacks authority to address or modify. In this particular case, Council has an additional alternative action available to it, which is to withdraw the application for the time extension on the conditional use permit, since the town is the applicant. In this instance, if the Council decides that the town should not pursue a skate park at 41 Miles Avenue at this time, it may vote to withdraw the application. If the Council decides to withdraw the application, no further action is required and this proceeding will be concluded. That concludes staff's report. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any questions from council? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. A question for Mr. Lawrence and a question for Mr. Korb. First of all, as I look at the application, when it says the error and abuse because conditions have changed, and I'm a bit confused because I would have thought that that would be a new information issue. So if you could clarify that for me, I'd appreciate it. The question for Mr. Lawrence concerns our legal and ethical obligations concerning bias. Certainly the council and various members of the council in various ways have been involved in the issue, and some enlightenment on that matter would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll take both questions.
Thank you, Mr. Korb.
First of all, with regard to the issue raised at the Planning Commission, the question of whether conditions had changed, meaning the site conditions, physical conditions, parking, traffic, and so on, was raised at the Planning Commission. So essentially, what the appellant is saying is that the Planning Commission erred in making its determination that conditions didn't change, and I assume that's what they're going to argue tonight. With regard to the ethical issues raised by your second question, it's a due process issue in the first instance. Decision makers are supposed to be reasonably impartial. However, council members in this situation are not precluded from having personal views, political views, and from expressing those views, including in the context of an election. The only issue is, are you capable of listening to the evidence and making your decision on the basis of the record before you and any additional evidence you wish to add to the record, or do you enter the proceeding with a fixed opinion that is inalterable and thus will not be a fair hearing officer in this proceeding. It's up to each council member to make that decision. I can't make that decision for you. However, each council member has expressed, at the very least, a political opinion with regard to Measure D, which is a somewhat separate issue from the issue before council tonight. And I have to leave it to council's own individual opinion of whether you're biased or not with regard to whether you can participate.
Thank you. Further question? Yes, Mr. Glickman.
Just a little bit of clarification on that, because, we do look to you as our, I think ethical officer is the right word, because you're our town attorney, to maybe give us some guidance in terms of what the courts have found to be acceptable and not acceptable.
Well, as I said, what the courts have found to be acceptable is for council members to have expressed political opinions, to have expressed those opinions in the context of an election where there was an election issue in question. There are several different types of bias issues that courts have dealt with. I can't go through all the decisions. I don't have them memorized. Some concern personal bias regarding individuals who are involved in a proceeding. Others concern the issues in the proceeding. This would clearly be an issue area. But again, what it ultimately comes down to is whether council members have the ability, notwithstanding any political positions that they've taken in the past, to sit with an open mind, listen to the evidence, and make your decision based on the record.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none. Okay, we will now call the applicant up. Yes. Mr. Larson.
Vice Mayor, I did want to clarify one point. The city clerk as well as the appellant have both verified that a transcription fee was paid as part of the appeal fee for this project of roughly $1,600 to $1,700.
Transcription fee was paid.
Correct.
For this appeal. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Now we'll move on to the appellant. If the appellant will please come up here to the microphone, and Madam Clerk, 10 minutes on the timer, please.
Good evening. My name is Rick DiNapoli. I live at 130 Edelin Avenue. And actually, my wife has actually signed the papers, but I'll be speaking for her tonight. We're appealing the conditional use permit, which was for a concrete skate park to be built at 41 Miles Avenue using, in part, public money. That's the issue that's here. And our appeal is based on a number of things, change conditions, and like, but primarily I think what the problem that we are having with the whole process is that all the studies that have been done, or the parking lot and the loss of the parking lot is really a loss of an off-peak used lot. All the measurements, all the studies, all the parking, traffic, noise are really conducted during peak hours, and therefore do not accurately reflect the use and what the loss of that parking lot entails. In March of 2004, there's a parking study that was done between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. for 1 week. August 2007, there was another one done 9 to 5 work week. October 2007, there was 2 done, one from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., which is a little bit odd because the skate park during that period of time wouldn't even be open until 3 p.m. according to the conditions of the CUP. And then again, there was one finally done on October 27th and 28th, which showed modest parking. If I could you turn this thing on? If they had gone the night before, which was the Howling Halloween, they would have seen a full parking lot. They would have seen a full park.
Mr. DiNapoli, if you move away from the microphone, would you take it with you, please?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. They would have seen a full parking lot used for the Howling Halloween. Despite the reports and the use of the lot, I think that the town has mentioned that it's not the use of the lot that is the primary issue, but whether or not that parking can be replaced. And what they offer for replacement parking is the 56 spaces along Miles Avenue. The 56 spots along Miles Avenue at that location is 33 feet wide, asphalt to asphalt. with parking on both sides taking up another 17 feet. So therefore, you have 18, this is October 26, 6 p.m., used for the Halloween. You can see the parking lot is completely filled and it was starting to overflow. The town council, or the staff report used parking done the following morning, and then the next morning after that to show that it wasn't used. Again, it's an off-peak use. Again, Miles Avenue, 33 feet with parking on both sides of 17 feet. That's offering between 16 and 18 feet for people to exit their cars and to walk along the street. This is the Miles Avenue lot, the morning of the Christmas parades, fully utilized. There is about, as I said, there's 17 feet, which is going to be shared by moms opening their cars onto the street because there are no curbs, getting out, bicyclists, strollers, kids walking to Balzer Field, joggers, and all the city traffic and the city cars, the large vehicles that utilize that come to and from the corporate yard. In utilizing these spaces, the town is creating a very dangerous circumstance, and as you'll see later on when we talk about traffic, the opportunities for an encounter by cramming all these people into a space of 17 feet is staggering. If a developer was to come to this town council with this type of solution, they would be rejected summarily and be right to do that, because this is considered a collector street. Collector street, for under your design guidelines, have to be 60 feet wide in order to have parking on both sides. Safety is another issue of why we feel that the CUP should not be extended and it should be terminated. Back in August, what we offered to show at the Planning Commission was, quite frankly, a very tragic event that happened in San Leandro, where a 13-year-old boy was killed skating down what the Mercury News and the reports called a steep hill in San Leandro. That was 165th Street in San Leandro. A copy of the photos are contained in your packet, showing the similarities between 165th Street and Miles Avenue, but I'll offer it here once again. The top is 165th Street, top to bottom. The bottom two photos are Miles Avenue. Again, you're putting a skate park at the bottom of a hill, a steep hill, where it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, and that's one thing that has never really been completely evaluated or considered. Another measure that has never been considered is the police role in monitoring this a proposed skate park. In the Los Gatos Weekly Times this year, January 15th, 2008, the report described the Scotts Valley Skate Park as requiring 44 incidences within an 18-month period, within an 18-month period. Scotts Valley monitors their skate park by doing drive-bys 4 times a day. I doubt very seriously if this council would consider a CUP issuing a conditional use permit for any type of business which required the police to drive by 4 times a day and still had 44 incidences of misdemeanors. By way of comparison, the Last Call, whose conditional use permit that this council properly severely restricted, had 100 incidences over a 3.5-year period. Then we have Measure D. Measure D talked about was not only money, but was also the location and the type of park described in the CUP. In essence, Measure D was the CUP. And as we all know, that was rejected by the voters 2-1. The voters have spoken, and I think that their will should be respected, and the CUP should be denied, or should not be extended. Finally, the basis of the extension, of all the extension, is really to allow a fundraising, privately organized fundraising effort to proceed. The staff report notes that in 3.5 years, only $14,000 has been raised in private donations. We've heard a lot higher numbers, but that also includes money that came from the town of Los Gatos, some of which has already been spent, money from Monte Sereno, which will go away in a few years if this private fundraising efforts are unsuccessful, and Sobrato's money, which actually only comes into play and can only be used once all the other money for the construction has already been raised and a building permit has been issued. Thus, the money, they will still have to raise all the money privately, probably over 1.3 to 1.5 million, and they have about 1% of that raised so far. That's not, I know there's been a lot of slurs about the fundraising effort and all that, but it is hard to raise money. It is. It's a very daunting task, but yet that was the condition for approval, and it's not really going anywhere. That's all I have for right now. We'll be offering some talks about the traffic and those during rebuttal. Thank you very much.
Mr. DiNapoli, just a minute. Any questions of the appellant? Seeing none, thank you. You may sit down. Madam Clerk, do you have any more cards from anyone? I see Mr. Davis has his card there. Any other cards that wish to be submitted? Okay, I've got 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, I see at least 20 out there, so we'll go 2 minutes on the speaker cards. And what I'd like to do to make this as efficient as possible is line up the speakers on the bench here in front of the microphone. So I'm going to call 3 people at a time. When I call your name, please come forward and sit on the front bench there just behind the microphone. I have Bill Lang, Conrad von Bruggen, Stephen Leonardis. Madam Clerk, it'll be 2 minutes. Bill Lang.
Hello, council members. There are going to be a few people talking this evening, and Mr. DiNapoli has already said a few things that I'm going to summarize here real quick and not spend a whole lot of time on, but it summarizes what you'll be hearing tonight. With regards to this conditional use permit, there are going to be traffic problems. There are already traffic problems with a lot of heavy equipment and the maintenance equipment going up and down that hill. I've heard numbers as much as 200 vehicles traveling up and down that road per day. There may be more than that. Somebody said earlier that there's less traffic now because people were laid off, positions were cut. There's still a lot of traffic. Second item is parking will become more limited as we take parking spaces out of that area and put the skate park in place. We already have enough problems with parking in downtown. Taking out more spaces doesn't make much sense. Third item is there are apparently going to be some code violations on the roadway and the parking area as that whole area gets re-laid out to support the parking and to support the skate park. I don't know the details of those violations, but apparently they need to be looked at very carefully. Fourth item is congested parking, especially during baseball games. That parking area is packed during ball games. When you take that out, I don't know where all the families are supposed to park to watch their kids play. Fifth item, there's the skate park itself is in a very secluded location, making it very difficult for the police to monitor.
Thank you, Mr. Lang.
That's it. Thank you.
Conrad Van Bruggen.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to appear tonight, and happy St. Patty's Day to everyone. The voters did speak with Measure D, as Mr. DiNapoli mentioned, last month when they rejected Measure D. Now, the questions I think that the council need to look at carefully are, did they reject the need for a skate park in general? Did they reject the proposed Miles Avenue location? Or did they reject the idea of spending significantly more money than was already allocated to build a full-fledged in-ground skate park? I believe that when they voted, they were clearly stating the latter, that for many, the cost just seemed too high for most voters. My family and I crisscrossed this town for many days as we spoke with citizens door to door about the advantages a skate park can bring to our community. And I know firsthand that there is a lot of support out there for a community skate park, a place where young skaters can safely develop their skills and have a great time with healthy activity. That support is clear. I also know firsthand that people are concerned about cost. In fact, in all those face-to-face conversations and phone calls, for those who didn't support Measure D that I spoke with, that was basically the only concern, cost. Except for a vocal group of neighbors who have convinced themselves that the site chosen by the town for the park is not appropriate, virtually none of the many people we met during those many hours of conversations had a problem with the Miles Avenue site. I urge this council to show the necessary leadership, to leave the use permit in place, to get behind the community pulling together, and let's build an inexpensive, above-ground skate park on Miles Avenue in the next year. Your voters will thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, please no clapping. Thank you. We don't want to be disruptive or, yeah, that's it. Mr. Stephen Leonardis. And then if we can please get on the bench John Wagner, Carl Collar, and Jordan Collar.
Stephen Leonardis, 136 Terracita Way. Tonight we're voting on the report prepared by your staff, and basically the conclusion says there is no new evidence that conditions have changed to invalidate the previous data regarding this project. So very narrow in scope, regardless of what is said here tonight. Now, the council has to come to court with clean hands. You have an obligation to be fair and unbiased decision makers. If not, there could be legal ramifications that the town could be subjected to. And during the campaign, Vice Mayor sent out this letter saying repeatedly that he does not support the proposed location. Mr. Wasserman also said in this letter that I'm fine with the skate park depending on where it is located. Mr. Perzinski, you are friends with the applicant. I know if it were my friend, I may be a little bit biased towards them. The ballot argument you wrote against Measure D, all three of you endorsed that. The letter you wrote to the paper against Measure D, we're not ruling on Measure D this evening, but clearly you guys have some preconceived opinions about what is being done here this evening, and I recommend that you recuse yourself. I think it's the only ethical thing to do, especially Mr. Wasserman. I think you have just gone too far opposing this location. Mr. Perzinski as well. Mrs. McNutt, I know you selected this location. Originally, you were the one who decided out of the 20 we had selected that I think this was the one you proposed, and everybody said aye at the meeting. I think you can rule impartially on this. I think Mr. Glickman can also rule on this, but
May I read this?
So,
Two
thank you.
paragraphs? Thank you. Or do you want? Mr. Brzezinski?
If I could just make a comment, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Sure.
I do find it disingenuous to pull the papers for everyone else but Mr. Glickman, when Mr. Glickman's name was on the other side of the ballot.
All right, thank you. One thing I would like to make clear to everyone, especially for those people that came here late, this is just a 4-sentence summation. Is this all right, Mr. Korb, to read?
As long as the rest of the council is okay, it's advice that I had previously given council in a confidential memo regarding the same issue that Mr. Glickman asked me about previously.
Sure, let me look to council for agreement. Yes, yes. Thank you. For those of you that didn't hear this when you came in, this was regarding the bias, the question of bias in decision-making. It says specifically, this rule does not preclude holding opinions, philosophies, or strong feelings about issues or specific projects, nor does it prohibit expression of views about matters of importance in the community, particularly during an election campaign. In conclusion, council members who expressed a view about Measure D may nevertheless participate in hearing the appeal of the time extension for the skate park use permit, so long as each retains a reasonably open mind to the evidence presented before and during the public hearing. As Mr. Leonard has said, this is not about Measure D. Tonight, the question is about the appeal for the extension of a conditional use permit. This is a land use decision. That said, we now move on to Mr. John
Mayor?
Wagner.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Since you accorded Mr. Brzezinski the opportunity for a brief comment, I'd like one as well.
Certainly.
Thank you. I gave great consideration, as I'm sure all the other council members did, to where our participation in the Measure D issue left us in terms of being biased or not biased by the legal definitions we're held to. Because if we violate those definitions, the town can be sued, and then we'll be acting irresponsibly. I think that the conclusion I came to, which I think is the conclusion that the other council members came to, that the act of taking a position on Measure D, supporting it or not, was not in and of itself bias. Whether actions that go beyond that cross any threshold is a question for the individual council member and for the advice of our ethical officer, who is our town attorney.
Thank you. All right, John Wagner, then Carl Collar and Jordan Collar.
Hi.
Thank you.
I'll make this short and sweet. I'm all for putting a skate park up. I think that all the skaters in here would agree that building ramps and having above-ground portable situation would be perfectly adequate. The kids went down there after the election and set their own ramps up and skated all afternoon. There wasn't very much traffic. There was a few people coming by watching. The place was, everything was good. Kids had a blast. All the ramps were up. That can happen again. About kids getting hurt, they're going to skate the hills. Doesn't matter where it is, they're going to skate them. And I remember a while back a kid got killed with a baseball when it hit him in the chest and his heart exploded. So you can die playing baseball. Misdemeanors, the kids weren't wearing helmets. They don't wear helmets. That happens. That's a misdemeanor, big deal. They don't wear helmets when they skate. I mean, it's going to happen. But the fact is it's a good sport. The kids are incredibly talented that do the things they do on skateboards. It's mainstream. There are people making money at it. And I think to just defeat this is just absurd. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Collar.
Hi, thanks for hearing from us. I think that when people voted on this issue, they voted their pocketbooks. They were voting no on the skate park at this cost, under these terms. They were not voting on the site. What's before us now is strictly a question of where, and I believe that it has come down to an issue of not in my backyard. I would like to talk about my front yard. I live in Los Gatos Heights, a big apartment complex directly overlooking the skate park site. My bedroom window looks right down on it. I drove over here right at 7 o'clock. I looked, and there were 4 cars in that parking lot, which has always been underutilized. I shouldn't say always. I take that back. There's 1 or 2 days of the year when it's full of cars, like the Christmas parade. I don't think that's reason enough to not build a skate park there for our kids. As far as safety, I believe it is an extraordinarily safe site. One reason for that, Miles Avenue is a dead end. Nobody who goes down that street is going anywhere else. They are going to Balzer Field, or they are going to the Corporation Yard. There are 4 driveways above the creek that come out into the street where the skaters would be passing. That's my apartment complex, the nice lady who owned the video store on Santa Cruz Avenue, the DiNapolis, and the house right below there. We all have to be very careful pulling out into the street anyway. There are police cars that come down that street. There are city service trucks. I just think it's a very safe place, and I don't think that safety is a legitimate concern. I don't think that parking is a legitimate concern, and I don't think that noise is a legitimate concern. We already hear the crack of the aluminum bat at Balzer Field. We hear the parents yelling, "Go, go, go, go!" We hear the trucks backing up, beep, beep, beep. We hear the freeway. I think it's a small price to pay if there's a little bit more noise, if our kids are allowed to have a place to have fun. You're being asked to legislate a negative, and I think that's a step in the wrong direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan Collar.
Good evening. My name is Jordan Collar. I live at 226 Edelin Avenue, and I'm here tonight to talk about the appeal process. I'll be the first to admit that I am no land use expert. I hope I'm not the only one here who's sometimes a little baffled by the intricacies of town code. But I look at this, and I look at the issues that have been raised by the appellant, and the standards by which they have to be held as far as what I understand, and I get the following. The council is called to decide whether or not there's been a significant change in information, or a significant change since the last time that you heard this information. And based on what the appellant himself said, there hasn't been. You look at parking concerns. The appellant has not argued that there has been a dramatic change in the parking situation in Los Gatos. The appellant has said that the parking lots are utilized more on certain days of the week, okay? On certain days of the year, excuse me. I live on Edelin Avenue, and I walk down that street every morning to go to school. I walk back every afternoon when I come home. I walk past an empty lot. This isn't a parking lot that's utilized to its fullest extent. It will be far better put to use as a skate park. You look at safety. The appellant talks about the grade of the street, but Miles Avenue has not gotten any steeper since the application was raised. Based on the staff's own report, the number of trucks, the number of traffic has gone down. If anything, it's a safer street than when the council considered this last. Next, the appellant talks about the police, talks about misdemeanors. While I'm offended by the suggestion that somehow inherently skaters are going to cause problems with the law, I will say that the appellant has not presented any compelling evidence that there has been any change in that state since the appeal was first held. Let the decision stand. As a voter, do not kill the skate park tonight.
Thank you. We now need Lauren Wagner, Stanford Stickney, and Kevin Peth.
Hi, my name's Lauren, and I live on 120 Bellcrest Drive. I'm a senior at Archbishop Mitty High School. And first of all, I would like to give a big thank you to Mr. Glickman for all his support and help for the skateboard park and his strong interest in giving back to the youth. And I'd also like to point out that just a few weeks ago, about 20 or so teens put out on a skate day at the Miles Avenue site. It was a great success. There were barely any cars there, and everyone who did show up gave us lots of support. Even the ranger that came by told us we were doing this for a good cause. And basically, I'm just trying to say that the skateboarders in our community will do whatever it takes to get this park. We are perfectly fine with portable ramps, and that's all we need. And it is really sad to hear that it comes down to the appeal of the site. And I hope we can all work together as a community to give the kids a safe place to skateboard. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stickney.
Hi, my name is Stanford Stickney. I live in 40 Ferry Plaza. The appellant mentioned some key points. He said, first of all, there's the parking violations, or there's a certain amount of space within the streets, where there's a hazard to going down the skate park. Council members, we have sent men to the moon. I think we can resolve the street. But what he did mention was safety. And I'd like to expand on that. Safety. Over the past 17 years, skateboarders have gotten hurt and in some cases killed while skateboarding in an environment which conduces injuries. Cars, pedestrians, everything that the member who spoke earlier stated. Now what's going on in the entire town of Los Gatos? Proposition D. Yes, it made a vote. But that wasn't, now let's look at that, the public, the adults. We already know that some adults don't want this. But that's not why this is created. This is created for the youth. This is created to make sure that when the youth skateboard, which they will, because they have for the past 17 years, and they probably will for the next 17 years, that they skateboard in a safe environment. That's what's coming down right now in this issue. Do we want to make sure that our children in this community, because they are going to skate, are they going to skate in an environment which is safe, which is not going to have cars, not going to have other pedestrians, and is not going to cause injury to themselves and or others? The fact of the matter is, the Cornerstone Developmental Survey said the biggest outcry the youth had was that they were not listened to. Let's look at this community. This is an adult-oriented community. For 17 years, what have the youth of Los Gatos unanimously cried for? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peth.
Hello, my name is Kevin Peth, and I live on 17985 Saratoga Los Gatos Road. And I'm here because I'm a skateboarder and believe that we should have a skate park in Los Gatos. My friends and I have been skateboarding for our whole lives, and we also play many other sports. I personally play soccer, and I've played soccer throughout high school, 4 years now, just finished. And my whole life, I had no problem finding soccer fields. There are plenty of soccer fields, basketball courts, and baseball fields all around town. And you know, the difference in these sports and skateboarding is a sport where everyone is welcome. You do not have to make a team, and everyone is welcome. It's up to the individual how fast they achieve their goals. Skateboarding is a perfect way for people of all ages to get out, get exercise, and have fun. And throughout all this, you don't have to make a team, and there is as much commitment as you would personally want. This is a friendly sport, however, it has nowhere to be practiced. Children are skateboarding near cars and people, endangering themselves and others. If a skate park is put in, we will no longer be skateboarding near roads or on private property. Now, I understand that about 25 unused spaces in the whole town is very tragic. However, what is more important, getting our children off the streets into a park where they can skateboard and practice their friendly sport safely, or keeping our couple parking spaces that we need for about 2 times in a year? You can decide that. Now, I understand Los Gatos does not want to pay for a concrete skate park, because why would parents want to pay for this? They're the ones voting, and they don't skateboard, most parents, only a few in the town. And so, basically, I just urge Los Gatos to do not appeal this grant, to look into making a metal skateboard ramp.
Thank you, Mr. Peth. Next 3, please, would be Mrs. Annie Lang, Michael DeLumi, Karen DeLumi.
Good evening. I'm Annie Lang at 151 Vista Del Monte. I still have a bit of a cold, so my voice isn't real great. I'm sorry. I've been a resident for 21 years here in Los Gatos. I'm also a registered disaster service worker. I was the emergency coordinator for amateur radio emergency services for Los Gatos for many years, and I'm also in equine disaster rescue for like fires and stuff like that. We try to mitigate putting people in dangerous situations, and having this skateboard here is very isolated. I'm also concerned about being able to, get rescue personnel in. When there was the fire in the hills in '96, there's issues with narrow roads and getting, services in. And Miles Road is not very wide, and when they're done with this, it will be difficult if you have a major injury to get people in, get them out. The downhill with the large trucks is just setting up a potential disaster. A lot of kids still will skate in the streets. I don't believe having a skate park will get them out of the street. I came home one evening, and I'm on Vista Del Monte. It's a fairly, not a real flat street, but a little bit of a slope. The kids were riding down at midnight on their bellies on their skateboards. Very impossible to see in the dark. If they do this stuff on Miles Avenue, even during the day, with a large truck coming by, it could be really tragic. Those are my concerns, and the isolation doesn't help in being able to get rescue there quick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLumi. And then Karen DeLumi? Where's Karen? Got it.
Good evening. My name is Michael DeLumi. I live at 111 Johnson Hollow, and I've been in Los Gatos for like 16 years, and I think it's time we'd have a skate park because I'm getting too old. I'm going to have to go to college next year, and anything would be acceptable now. I would go even with perhaps a metal ramp or a flat bar or maybe like a loop. I don't know. You decide. Anything would just make my dreams come true. And I hope you make the right decision towards this community as a whole. And thank you. Mike, I like your pen. I like it.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's. Ms. Karen DeLumi. St. Patrick's.
Get the right holiday today, huh?
That's right.
Hi, Karen DeLumi at 111 Johnson Hollow. First, I understand that it's probably pretty hard to even have to listen to me one more time, but I'm here again. And I know you guys are in a hard situation. Being all that everybody's been through, it's probably very tempting just to vote and want to squash the whole thing. On the other hand, if you do so, it looks biased. So, you guys are in a very hard situation. In hindsight is 2020. 6 years ago, you basically said, let's build a temporary park, and we listened to the kids and said, oh, let's raise money and build a concrete park. Well, 2 major economic downturns later and not understanding what it takes to raise that kind of money and listening to input from adults and kids, it's time to just build the temp park and for us to move forward with continuing to do fundraising, but instead of the different sports being siloed, for us to work together towards a future vision of some type of sports complex and to join the community together. And as much as you potentially may dislike the idea of us all having to sit down at a table and work through this, we're the adults of the community, and we all need to put any personal feelings aside and just do what's right. And I'll be there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wirtz, before we have our next speaker, if I can just have one point of clarification. Tonight's CUP land use decision relates to the plans that are in the CUP, which is the concrete park. Correct? That's what we're deciding on, extending a CUP for a concrete park?
That's correct.
Thank you. Next three speakers, Eric, forgive me, Reichweltz? Reichwein, thank you. Brandy Peck and Tom Spilsbury.
Hello, Town Council members. Okay, for the temporary park, I just, sketched out a little design, and I actually have a half pipe in my backyard, and it's 16 feet wide and 30 feet long and has an 18-foot vert wall, and that cost about $1,000. So we have like over $200,000. We could build 200 16-foot wide, 30-foot long half pipes, and that would be incredible. And we'll still have extra money left over. And here's another design that I drew to scale. Notice to scale. Right here. This is a fat bowl. This is a fat bowl right here. And this is a fat pool, 20 by 40. And there's a little spine. That would be pretty fun. Metal, whatever. Right here, right here is a jersey barrier. And here's a little fun box, have fun on that. Here's a little wedge. And I didn't have enough time to finish. Can you please turn your cell phones off? Very weird. Can you reset the time? Reset the time, 7 seconds. Okay. And right here, I tried to draw a quarter pipe, come around here with a little half pipe back there. And I estimated that, I looked into some websites, called some people. I got some people that I know. And I've estimated this whole thing right here, which would be terrific. Here's a little quarter pipe too right there. And some stairs with about less than $100,000. And for the land permit,
Thank you very much.
Can you set the time?
No, you're out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hold the applause, please? And the two gentlemen in the front, if I can just ask you to move over one bench, because that's our staging area for the three speakers.
Get out of there.
Brandy Peck?
Yes.
Wonderful. And then Tom Spilsbury, please.
This is still on, right? Okay. I know that tonight wasn't about deciding whether or not we want a skate park, but I just would like to point out that every person here that has spoken in favor of the skate park represents at least 50 other people that want the skate park. And when we had representatives from the skate park committee come and speak to the youth commission, they said that what they were lacking is the youth support. So I know that people on the youth commission took the initiative for themselves to go out and find the people that could be here tonight so that they could tell you that they want a skate park. And we found no other better time than at a town council meeting to speak to the people that implement all the things that we want. And I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to listen to all of us and remember that each person really does represent at least another 50 to 100 people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Spilsbury. And then Mr. Spilsbury, 1 second, please. If we could have Michael Silva, Kathy Morgan, and Michael Loya. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Spilsbury.
Thank you, Mr. Wasserman. Can I reset the time now so I pick up the... No.
You need to grab that microphone or speak into it so we can hear you.
Good evening, council members. I'm here tonight my name is Tom Spilsbury, 120 College Terrace Court, Los Gatos. I'm here tonight to talk about a land use issue, which I think we're all here. I don't think there's anybody here in the room who doesn't want a skateboard park, but I think it's where and how much. And I know that most adults do think about money and where it's going because somehow we have to earn it or get it or do something with it and make it work. So I'm here as a commercial owner of buildings in the town. I want to tell you that parking is a big issue. It's dealt with every tenant I deal with. It's dealt with every neighbor that I have. It's dealt with on a daily basis. And in fact, in the last 3 or 4 years, parking has become more and more difficult. In fact, I have owned these buildings for about 12 years and managed several others. And in the last 3 years, we have been towing vehicles, which we never had done before. And my tenants are towing them, and they're towing them against other people who are other property owners, and we're going into what we referredly call towing wars. And I know people say, well, parking isn't really an issue, or gee, there's parking here that isn't. But when you have to deal with parking problems, it's a very volatile issue. It's a very emotional issue. And people get very angry about it and very territorial about it. And I think from a land use standpoint, taking any parking away, whether it's, we could argue all day, whether how utilized, when it's utilized, it's still parking. And it's a parking space, there's parking spaces that are used a lot. Maybe not at this time or that time, but other times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spilsbury. Mr. Silva and Kathy Morgan.
Thank you. Michael Silva, 675 North Santa Cruz Avenue, the Ivy House. Interesting how things changed a little bit tonight. And but first, I think there is a conflict with parking at the Miles site. The baseball that's down there uses that area a lot. A lot. It's full. Where are they going to go? That issue was brought up. I haven't heard anything from people wanting to use this site for a skateboard park say too much about that. It's been kind of downplayed. I think there are major safety issues with that area as far as the hill is concerned, and the trucks and the corporation yards, and certain times of the year when Christmas parades and things like that use the parking. Personally, I'm in favor of a skate park. I think that we should have a skate park. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity. I can go off on all kinds of things and make tons of money out of this thing with a skate park. But not there. If we had a place that was a multifunctional or multi-sports area where there was a lot of other things going on at the same time and it was within that area, that would make sense. It would be perfect. You can build it any way you want it. Then let's talk about the CUP. And it was interesting how this came up because, as I understand it, it was brought up a little earlier that the CUP, what we're talking about tonight, the land use for that is for a cement area. That was it. Now, after all this time, I'm hearing people say, well, let's go back and we'll just have the temporary one and we'll put these things up. So does that mean that you put them up for a while, maybe you take them down for a while, go through all that process, or what's going on? I think the site on Miles for a cement skateboard park or any kind at this particular time for a permanent place is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan and Michael Loya.
Tonight, you're voting on a conditional use permit for a use that two-thirds of the voters in the Measure D election don't want to pay for. I think it's time to put this really divisive issue to rest, and extending the CUP would simply drag it on. The hearings, the whole thing. The council may withdraw this conditional use permit if there are new conditions or a change of conditions. And now we know the results of votes of our citizens on Measure D that we didn't know before when the CUP was drawn up. It's not an issue of councilmen's biases, it's an issue of a documented public vote. And I think that vote should be listened to. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Loya, and before you speak, please, Tom Calderwood, followed by Citizen Ray, followed by Mr. Joe Kapp. Michael, please.
Hi, Michael Loya, 200 Winchester Circle. You know, I'm glad that we've mentioned that this issue tonight is really, truly not about Measure D. I'm going to make this public. I did vote no on Measure D, not because I didn't want a skate park, only because I had an issue with the measure itself. I support the skate park. I think it does need to be built and does need to be done. I've heard about parking. I work in a place where parking is really a struggle at the high school. If you want to really see a true parking issue, try and work where I work at, and that's at the high school. So when you compare the high school issue of parking compared to Miles Avenue, it's really insignificant. I myself have had some debates with the skate park and some pluses with the skate park, but I do encourage the council to extend the conditional use permit. I think it truly is something that they should work on, and they've really been working hard. Again, I don't see where the Planning Commission has erred yet, even though there's been talk about parking and the slope. A lot of the kids I've seen are very safe, and I do encourage that. It's not about youth. Our community does value youth. I know that. I can probably prove it out of anybody else winning that award, that Los Gatos does care about its youth. It's not about kids. It's not about we like teens, we don't like teens, we want a skate park, we don't want a skate park. It's about the conditional use permit. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Calderwood.
Hi. I think the issues around parking and safety have already been covered. They're non-issues. I'm just here to voice my support, keep the conditional use permit in place. Let's get the skate park built. Some of the letters that I saw in the newspaper, I think some of the underlying message that I hear out of this is that if you're against the skate park, it doesn't matter about the location. The location is what it is. Is that, to me, it comes out as you're not for the kids. You're saying that unused parking spaces are more important than kids. To me, it's that simple. So I'd encourage people to support the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Ray, followed by Mr. Kapp, then Sandy Decker, and Sean Murphy.
Well, I have a different cap on tonight. I hope you know me. Okay? Represents 2 years military service, okay? So I'm an ex-citizen soldier. And if I may, I think that may add a slight weight to my argument, okay? Because I was trained by my Uncle Sammy, the soldier. And I'm down here tonight soldiering. First off, the stated bias by Wasserman, Krasinski, and McNutt was spelled out beautifully by Stanford Stickney, okay? Beautifully, so I don't have to go any further. But I want to tell you, if push comes to shove, and if worst comes to worst, I am looking forward to a lawsuit by a pro bono attorney who will sue you, gruesome threesome, for damages that will fund the skateboard park. Now, isn't that beautiful irony? We sue the gruesome threesome for the money to fund the kids' skateboard park. I can just taste it. It is beautiful in concept. Okay? What do you think, Brzezinski? I hope your face gets a little bit red. It means you're listening. You know, the appeal said conditions have changed. What conditions have changed? What conditions have changed? My God, it says we had 4,000 citizens voted to rectify the discrimination, underlying discrimination, by 3 members of the town council. Relative to the skateboard park.
Thank you, Citizen Ray. Your time is up. No, everyone has stayed within the time limits. You need to do the same.
Well, thank you for your courtesy.
Thank you.
You're always the same.
Cap. Sandy Decker, Sean Murphy.
How come my friend here's a citizen and I'm just Mr.? Okay, council.
Oh, it's you.
What do you need?
Excuse me, I need my cane. My cane.
Oh, cane.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I've lived here 20-some years plus. I live on Edelin Avenue, and I'd be a hypocrite if I said I didn't love sports. I think sports is one of the great parts of our lives, and I think in Los Gatos we have tremendous sports programs, and I think skateboarding should be part of Los Gatos. But I have a problem with this location. I live in this area close by, and I see big trucks, traffic coming up and down Miles. I see it going in and out of the neighborhood, and I think that if we change anything in regard to putting more traffic there, and nothing has been said about the fact that Miles Avenue crosses the trail crossing that has hikers, that has bikers, that has older people that are walking their dogs, doing things along that trail. And to my knowledge, Miles, as you saw in the picture, crosses that. And that is a very dangerous location. And I don't think that further skateboarding type activity in where it's planned is not a good place for it. You got to put it somewhere else. You got to put it on flat land. You got to put it somewhere where access to the area where kids can feel safe, that's where you need to put it.
Thank you, Mr. Cap. Mrs. Decker, followed by Sean Murphy, then Michael Burke.
Sandy Decker, 45 Glen Ridge. Good evening, Council. I find myself in a very unique situation tonight. I sat with the four of you when the CUP was approved. And in the years since, we have all seen a lot of changes. I'm surprised to hear that no changes have taken place, because now I'm an attendee at the Little League instead of a parent, and I find it incredibly crowded during the summer, not only with what goes on with Little League, but frankly just what goes on down in that area with all of the people that are using our parks, are using our trails as we hope they would, and the additional parking from downtown. We all tried very, very hard to talk our merchants downtown into having their employees park there, and they are still working at it. The merchants are still trying very hard to leave those spaces open in front of their stores for their patrons rather than their employees. However, that is not what I want to talk to you about tonight. The four of you and I are very, very conscious of what our responsibilities are to this community, and liability is a big one with this particular site and this concrete park that is called out for, in this CUP. I'd like to talk tonight about the only safeguard we have against liability, and that's State Bill 1296. That's the skateboard liability law. In this concrete skateboard park, this liability bill states that this skating is a dangerous and hazardous recreational activity for persons over 14, and that's where the protections are. Can this community accept the liability costs for a child under 14 years old using this particular park? Something else that concerns me is that we are covered only in a supervised park with these kids in protective equipment. You and I have heard testimony over and over that that is not what they want.
Thank you, Ms. Decker. Sean Murphy, followed by Michael Burke, and then Nathan Burke. Go ahead,
Hello,
Mr.
my
Murphy.
name is Sean Murphy. I live on 72 Fairview Plaza, 72 Fairview Avenue. I don't know my address. But I am
72 Fairview Plaza.
Yeah. I play baseball, soccer, and I am also a skateboarder. And my friends and I are actually only eligible to skate in Campbell, Sunnyvale, and some other cities that are far away from here. And we want a skateboard park where we don't have to drive all the way to another city just so that we can skateboard, because we have to skateboard on streets with small ramps that we can hardly do anything on, and we don't really like it. So we're wanting a skateboarding park, and when we heard that it was rejected, we were sort of sad, but my friend Stanford Stickney told me about this meeting, so I decided to come, and now I'm speaking here about the skateboarding park. And I believe it's a good idea because there are a lot of kids that like to skateboard. There are some that are actually very good at it and very talented. Some of us are actually going pro now after signing up from certain companies. It gives you much strength. It's a major sport, and it's very fun. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. Burke, the elder.
Thank you. I hope I don't irritate some friends tonight, but I want to talk about process, not a skate park. The Planning Commission hearing on this was a farce. After the public hearing closed, issues of CEQA and the negative deck were brought up. Why, I don't know. And then it was continued to another meeting where the negative deck was introduced. No public testimony, written or spoken, was allowed. And then one commissioner in particular made the comment that the rule is that the neighbors have the burden of proof to show things have changed. As far as I know, that rule was made up at that point, but he convinced his fellow commissioners of this. And then it was that they had to refute the information in the negative deck. The negative deck hadn't even been introduced as evidence until after the public hearing was closed. And that became the standard in which they needed to refute. You can look at the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting. Not only do I think at best you need to send this back to the Commission and tell them to hear it fairly, you need to give the Deniapolis their money back for this appeal. They were not granted a fair hearing. It was a farce, and I'm sorry to the members of the Planning Commission for saying that, but that's what I feel. And on the second thing, as far as your discretion tonight, you're the applicant. You can decide to pull this application for any reason whatsoever. Voter approval, the fact that the skateboarders haven't raised the money they said they were going to, or you just feel this is no longer the best location you can find. You have complete discretion on that as the applicant to pull the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. And now Nathan Burke.
Hello, I'm Nathan Burke, and I live on 104 Spruce Hill Court. And I'm here to discuss two main topics that have been brought up over and over again, and that's the location and safety. And first of all, the location is right next to a baseball park. I've been playing baseball my whole life, so I think a skate park right next to the baseball park would probably be the funnest thing for most kids, because when I was young, most baseball players liked to skateboard also. And then where the location is also helps for the safety, because I've seen many policemen going down to fill up their gas because the gas station is apparently right around the corner. So I don't think it would be a main issue since there's so many police here in this town. And I'd just like to state out that I've seen way more people here trying to fight for the skate park than trying to get rid of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Murphy, and that's the final card I have, except for this. So if anyone wishes to speak on this St. Patrick's evening, bring up your card now.
Good evening. My name is Tim Murphy, and I reside at 129 Edelin Avenue. I'd like to go a little further on this liability issue that the town would assume if this, in fact, skateboard park was built. As a developer, I know that every community I work in, the first thing I require is that you do all of your off-site improvements as a condition of doing a development. There seems to be one exception in this town to that rule, which is the town itself. They have built the corporate facility, the recycle center, the baseball park, and the courtyard, and have never done anything as far as improving the frontages along Miles Avenue. You're dealing here with one parcel, so this development on a portion of that parcel would require a private developer to do all of the street work for the entire parcel. I think if you leave it the way it is, the liability of the baseball families coming down that street is your liability. You have done nothing to protect the public using that right of way, and yet now you're forcing them to park in what I would consider illegal spaces and walking down the middle of that street to get to their baseball games. That doesn't get you off the hook when you keep talking about the liability as it relates to the skateboard park. Thank you.
Thank you. I now have Lynn Kennedy and Autumn Groth.
I'm Lynn Kennedy, thank you. As I told the Planning Commission, conditions have changed. I will be very brief on that. It's in the record. There's more trail use, there is more parking use, there's more parking use at night, and the street spots are not adequate to replace that. However, one condition has changed even since the Planning Commission meeting, and that's a big condition. It's the budget of the state of California. The town of Los Gatos will, in fact, be receiving considerably less revenues from the state of California in its next budget and must prepare accordingly. I would suggest that even the funds that the town had planned to commit to as matching funds to, not matching, but as initial seed funds to the skate park may no longer be something that we can afford. So I would recommend that you either grant the DeNapoli's request to not extend the permit because, in fact, conditions have changed, or simply withdraw the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Autumn Groth, followed by Alex Avey.
Hello, my name is Autumn Groth, and I live at 239 Edelin Avenue. And I must point out that I am only 12 years old, but I would like to represent my friends and the kids of Los Gatos. And I don't skate, so you guys are always probably like, well, why are you here, right? I mean, like, I don't skate. But as it came down to when we voted for Measure D, the parents were the ones that voted, and I don't think that they saw the kids' point of view. So I would like to point out many of the very points that have been seen over as we discuss this. And, well, one of them is the parking issue. And I live on Edelin, which is right above Miles. And parking isn't that big of a deal as Balzer Field is down there, so Little League baseball is played down there, but I just came from Baggerly Field, and there's already a baseball field over there, so I don't think that, and there's games are hardly ever played there, and so that probably wouldn't be as much of an issue as safety would. And, well, I mean, hello, there's this fire department right down the street. I mean, I don't really think that kids are going to get hurt, because that's what we sort of do, but kids are going to get hurt, but there's a fire department down the street, and so they would be able to get there quickly if there was a major issue. And another thing that I wanted to point out was all the towns around, cities and towns around the area all have skate parks except us, and I recently went to a skate park around the area, and I saw so many of my friends, because mostly the skaters that go to the parks in the other areas are from Los Gatos, and that's because most skaters are from here. And I hope that you hear my viewing on this as I stand up for the children of Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Groth. We have Alex Avey and Lee Quintana.
Hello, I'm Alex Avey. I've only lived in this town for 4 years, but as a skateboarder, for the past 4 years, I've been skating around this town, and as a town without a skate park, I've been having to find fun spots to skateboard, and there really aren't many. And for those that I have skateboarded in, I've received multiple tickets from the police department. And if they're going to not let us skateboard, why don't they build a skate park for us to enjoy so we don't have to keep getting pushed down by the law. And I don't know. If you spend lots of money to build like baseball fields for baseball players and those kids, I think it's fair enough to say skateboarders should have their place in this town too. And you do have $200,000 to spend, and for all these people with the wealth in this town, that's not much out of each homeowner's pocket. So if that's what you're worried about, I don't know. Then I guess, I don't know. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Avey. And Ms. Quintana.
Good evening. Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I only have one brief thing to say. In listening to the testimony tonight, it seems to me that we're dealing with a land use issue, and the testimony tonight is new information in that it appears that even the supporters of the skateboard park are admitting that they can't raise the money for a concrete skateboard park. Therefore, we are talking about a different project than was approved in the CUP. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's my final card. Seeing no one else, we'll now turn back to the appellant, and the appellant has up to 5 minutes for closing statements.
Council, good evening. My name is Jonathan Knowles. I live on Roxbury Lane, which is 5 miles away from the proposed site. More than that. So this is not a case of not in my backyard by any means. I think we all know this has nothing to do with skateboarding, whether that's good or not. As a former manager of the Upland Pipeline Skateboard Park in Southern California, I think skateboarding is a fine thing. I disagree with one of our speakers earlier. I voted against both the money and the location when I voted no on Measure D. We've certainly heard, there's been a lot of emotion expressed tonight. We've heard a lot of I thinks and I feels. We've had a good threat and some imaginative statistics and even a few laughs from our youth speakers this evening. That's fun to make it nice and light this evening. But even though I've been in technology for the last 17 years, my prior training is actually as a scientist. And coming from academia, I'm here just to simply present a few facts to you regarding new information, specifically around traffic on Miles Avenue. I'd like to start by talking about traffic origin, hotspots, and destinations. This is the area that we're talking about. We have a traffic corridor here on Miles Avenue that not only includes the parking lot here, but also includes other areas such as the town yard, the creek trail, the city areas where we have all our trucks, as well as the place where we have all that truck yard, where all those tree trimming trucks are. In addition, we have condominiums and apartments, and even the people who are out on University turning down Miles Avenue looking for parking. So if we take a look at the facts, this is a traffic study that we've done. As a matter of fact, we actually say that, hey, the reason that the Planning Commission erred was because a traffic study's never been done. It simply has not been done, and one needs to be done. So we've gone out and done one on our own, using a little bit of technology. Here's how it worked. We put a camera on the DiNapoli house and pointed it across the street with a motion sensor. Every time a vehicle crosses by, it's recorded, a snapshot's taken, and we record the data. We have a little latency problem so that when two vehicles go by, whether they're that close or even 30 seconds apart, we don't capture the second image. So we actually are undercounting in the data that we're presenting tonight. If we take a look at that data, we can see that not only are we seeing almost 800 traffic events during daylight hours on Miles Avenue, but in fact the peak time is between 3 and 4 o'clock, prime skateboarding time, when the skateboard park would be open. Now, I'd like to very quickly just take you on a quick look at what it looks like, a day in the life of the traffic on a weekday on Miles Avenue. So this is the information. These are actual images taken, showing you what the traffic looks like on a typical weekday. This was just last Wednesday. Yeah, many of them are looking for parking. They're looking for parking and turning around and coming back up because they can't find parking. Notice also the number of trucks, large trucks that are passing by as well.
Excuse me, Mr. Knowles. Sure. Madam Clerk, if you can stop the clock for a minute. Just to give everyone viewing this, which is Knowles? The going up and down to the right, or going down the other way?
This is Miles Avenue.
No, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Jonathan Knowles.
We do have Knowles Street further
Thank you.
north in the city. Okay. So we could keep on going here for a while, but instead I'm going to jump back over here to my slides. Pardon me. I hate having to look for things. So that's what a day in the life looks like. We can take a look at Sunday traffic as well, and actually the data shows that on weekends there is even more traffic than that is going by. And again, the peak traffic, notice it's at the prime usage of when people would actually be skating at a park like that. We've done image capture for that as well. But I think you get the point when I showed you all those images going back before. And you'd be surprised at how many trucks are still going on Sunday. A lot of PG&E trucks and tree trimming trucks as well. We think there are other considerations that should be considered, along with the ones we presented so far, that should be considered in a real traffic study actually done by the town. Certainly parking. This was just taken this weekend. This is the parking lot. Balzer Field. This is the overflow parking lot at Balzer Field. You can see it's almost full. I don't think we should rely on photos submitted by town members as our official study for making these kinds of decisions. Additionally, we should consider things coming up the hill in the blinding sun. You can see the person in this vehicle trying to keep their head up out of the sun. Additionally, we said heavy trucks, and we weren't exaggerating. Heavy trucks are using Miles Avenue constantly. We have the images and data here to show it. And finally, en route skaters. We have to consider that if we're going to do something like this, that should be a part of the traffic. I think they know some of the folks here. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you'll remain there, we're going to have any questions of council. Mr. Glickman.
Thank you, Mr. Knowles. I'd just like to understand better the last statement that you made. You said we should not take into consideration any photos submitted by town members. Could you help me understand what you meant by that?
Certainly. I think the staff report said that the way that it had been determined that there was not a change or increase in parking was literally the words in there were photos submitted by town, the residents of the town.
Mr. Mayor, would you permit, Mr. Vice Mayor, would you permit our staff to comment on that?
Certainly.
The issue would be traffic data. So what we're looking for is traffic data. Pictures are interesting, but not necessarily evidence of, and what the issue here is, evidence of an increase over which the baseline negative declaration used for its analysis.
And if I may, sir? No?
That's up to the Vice Mayor.
Okay.
Mr. Glickman, did Mr. Lawrence answer your question?
Yes, he did.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if I did, but
So, that's okay. We're all done there as far as your time being up. Any other questions of the appellant? Seeing none from council, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now close the public portion of item number 11 tonight, and I look to council for discussion and potential motion, action, etc. All righty, seeing none, what I'm going to...
Mr. Wassman, I'll go first.
Okay, Mr. Brzezinski.
Several items, several issues have been raised tonight, and again, we appreciate the very significant willingness of our community to participate in this process. It is a land use issue. We're looking basically to either approve what the Planning Commission offered us or to accept the appellant's position and overturn that. For my part, I think that it seems like whenever we have this discussion, we've had it for a number of years. A lot of items come to the table. A lot of items become somewhat disparate to the table with many perspectives or points of view that aren't necessarily to the point or to the issue at hand. I don't think that tonight's discussion really was about skateboarding, and I don't think that it was about bias. Frankly, I will say, I speak for myself, there is no bias that I feel, and I'm sure that the other members of the council at the dais feel the same way, no matter what occurred in the political issues relative to Measure D, because we did have positions that we promoted. And at that point in time, I think it's very clear from our attorney's presentation, as Mr. Wasserman outlined it, and that we're well within our purview. If we weren't, then no one could make this decision. No one could sit here and make the decision tonight. It would be, there would be no body capable of doing that. And it is ours to determine whether we're biased or not. And I will tell you for my part that I always come to these meetings, as you know, open to whatever outcomes result from the public input. That said, I think there are a number of issues that have been raised in the course of the last several months, and one of those cannot be ignored, and that's the fact that on February 5th there was an election that took place in this town. And in that election, there were 3 specific items that were asked of our public. And those items were, one, that the town would pay up to $1 million to build a skate park in the description as it was designated in the initiative. The second was that the town would fund up to $50,000 a year in perpetuity to maintain that park. And the third was the park would be placed at Miles Avenue. Now, I find it difficult to differentiate all 3 of those when we have a vote that indicates a supermajority or a 2-to-1 measure were opposed. And I believe that for my purposes tonight, if we had been looking at the vote that had gone the other way, even if it had been 1 more vote in favor, that I, and I'm sure the rest of the council, would have gone forward with whatever the proposal was for the skate park and the skate park completion at that time. But we have to face the fact that this community was asked to take a stand. And on February 5th, there was a stand taken. And I, for my part, cannot determine the intent of the voters. I can only look at the vote count and the specific items contained in the measure itself. And I think it was Ms. Morgan who made the comment that there were 3 items in that measure, and technically speaking, if we're talking about democracy and how democracy works, then the majority of this community rejected those 3 items. For me, one of those items was a specific site, and that specific site was Miles Avenue. And therefore, I find that it's very difficult as a member of this council who voted in favor of this in 2004, I believe, to now in 2008, not state that there was some new information that we didn't have then. The new information was provided us on February 5th. So I'm going to make a motion for purposes of discussion. I'm going to move that, indeed, this is an item that rests solely with the council. It's now a policy issue. The Planning Commission did not have access to make or change policy. The Planning Commission was very appropriately faced with certain restraints on their decision-making, and they voted to extend for another year. But I believe at this point, having been given the information by the community's majority, I think that at this point in time, I would move that we withdraw the conditional use permit, and that in so doing, that we terminate the discussion of this site and move forward at a future date to whatever would occur beyond this.
Thank you. I have a motion on the floor. Looking for a second.
For discussion purposes, I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. McNutt. Let's proceed with discussion. Mr. Glickman.
I think we all read the electoral tea leaves perhaps differently. One could say, well, the voters had 3 issues on the ballot, and that given that they voted a certain way, they voted a certain way on all issues. Or one could say that since they weren't given the opportunity to vote separately on those issues, then that's not a conclusion that one can draw. So on that specific issue alone, with respect to my fellow council member, I don't read the tea leaves that way. It would be my impression, and again, there was a very vigorous discussion in this community about this, and what I heard, other than from the residents near Evelyn Avenue, and respect a neighborhood's view, just that sometimes we have to take a townwide view of issues. But other than those residents, primarily what I heard was it's too expensive. And in fact, if that is, I think, a reasonable interpretation of what the voters said, then it follows that they did not say specifically, don't put it there. So I can't draw that conclusion from the election. I can certainly draw the conclusion they didn't want to spend money. And that's fairly clear to me. Ms. Quintana made an interesting point. She said the proponents admitted they can't raise the funds. With respect to our ex-planning commissioner, I didn't hear that. I heard a number of the skaters say, and I think in retrospect I appreciate this, that when some of the, this is about 2-3 years ago, and some of the young skaters said, we'd like to have something a little nicer than what Campbell had or has, and this council said, okay, well, that's it, that's what you have to do, and go out and raise the money for it. I don't think that they, or perhaps even I, appreciated in these economic times the magnitude of that challenge. Whether it was the better part of wisdom or not to have posed them that challenge, to say either you will raise the money for about $1 million concrete skate park, you don't get any skate park at all. For better or for worse, that's what we did. The issue then before us now is, do we give them another about a year with perhaps the enthusiasm we've seen tonight to try to raise those funds, or in that time the council could certainly consider whether a less ambitious park at that same site would be appropriate. So that being the case, if the issue before us is, do we give them, taking that it may have to be concrete if the council doesn't want to consider something a little more modest, do we give them the opportunity to try to raise the money? And if we say, no, we're not going to give them that opportunity, well, for this council member, that position, even in light of the vote, would be a little hard to understand.
Thank you. Did you have a comment? Otherwise, I was going to make one. Okay. As chair, I was trying to wait to speak to the end. Appreciate everyone coming out here tonight and expressing their opinions. As Mrs. Decker said, we were all here when this issue first came up. And it was 3 or 4 years ago when this item came up that I voted for a modular park on Miles Avenue. What has changed since then is several things for me. One, when we voted for the modular park on Miles Avenue, the young people of this community, I see a few familiar faces here and some new faces. One gentleman mentioned he came here about 4 years ago. The young people of this community came to us and said, do not build a modular park. We will not use it. And at that time, this council said, you're the customers, we're going to listen to you. We're going to listen to the people. Since then, fundraising efforts didn't work out for whatever reasons. New information came out with the Measure D, the yes and the no, and the traffic counts, and the parking concerns, and all the rest. And I have to admit, back then, I didn't notice that the traffic count was done in August, which is the biggest vacation month in Los Gatos, and parking, the town's pretty empty in August as people go away before school starts. It was taken in October, which it was taken before 3 o'clock in October. It wasn't taken during Little League season, February through June. It wasn't taken during November and December holiday season. It wasn't taken those months when it was used. So for me, that's new information. The traffic counts. We have a, I don't want to say an amateur photographer, but I'm sure he didn't get paid, so I guess that's an amateur, showing 600 plus vehicles going up and down Miles Avenue on any and every given day. What we didn't have back in '04 when we approved a modular park that was turned down by the young people was the police information, the daily trips in Sunnyvale, in, it escapes me right then, but in Scotts Valley, in Sunnyvale and Scotts Valley, where we found out over a couple of years that police go by 3 and 4 times. We didn't have back then when we approved this skate park the cost of police services, nor did we have the cost of liability for young people under 13 years of age that get injured, even to defend a lawsuit to prove that we're not liable. And then perhaps the biggest thing of all is we hadn't asked the people of Los Gatos. This town council was making that decision. We hadn't asked the people. So then the Measure D ballot measure came up. And we asked the people, do you want a concrete skate park built at Miles Avenue, paid with, certainly partially, public funds? And by a 2-to-1 supermajority, the people of Los Gatos said no. So the young people said we won't skate in a modular park. The voters, 18 and over, said no, we don't want a concrete park there with public funds on Miles Avenue. We work for the people, okay? We represent the people. The people have spoken. So from my standpoint, a lot has changed. And even if nothing had changed, the people of Los Gatos have said, no, we don't want to, the voters have said we don't want a skate park there, and we were told by the young people, we don't want a modular. And what's before us tonight is a land use decision that asks one question: should the town extend the conditional use permit for a concrete skate park at Miles Avenue paid by public funds? And so for those reasons, I'm supporting the motion.
I guess I have to talk now. I have several points I want to make, little scraps of paper here. I have really given this so much thought. I have probably a little bit different perspective on this than maybe some of the other folks. First of all, I really would like to have a skateboard park in Los Gatos. I love the design of the in-ground one. And I had a chance to go to that design charrette, and Mr. Glickman was there, and it's just an extraordinarily beautiful design. It has an extraordinarily big price tag to it, but it would be fabulous to have it there. I still think that Miles Avenue, out of all of the places that were looked at, and I think that the skateboard subcommittee looked at 26 different sites, that has the best potential for it. I like the fact that it's adjacent to Balzer, and I have a vision of that whole area someday being a recreation area next to the trail, and I think that works out well. As I looked at what we had before us tonight, which was the extension of the CUP, I kept trying to take skateboard park out of it and pretend it was anything else other than a skateboard park, and then analyze it from that point of view. And we typically will have, if a developer comes through and they ask for an extension on a CUP, we almost automatically give them a second shot and even a third shot. I'm sorry, not a third, a first extension and a second extension. A third one, we start getting concerned about it. So, have things changed enough, or should we just kind of automatically extend that CUP? If that was the only thing that was before us tonight, I would I would be saying, yes, I think we should just let the Planning Commission decision stand and continue the CUP. What does it hurt? However, then we have to look at it from the point of view that the town of Los Gatos is also the applicant. We're the developer. So if you look at it again, taking skateboard park out of it, pretend that it's something else. At what point would an applicant or a developer say, the world has changed enough that I don't want to go forward with this application? I don't think it's going to be reasonable. We had a situation 2 or 3 years ago. They mentioned it in the Planning Commission transcripts. One of them was an apartment complex, and they ran into financing difficulties because the environment had changed and apartments were not as great an investment for a developer. So they had asked for an extension of their CUP once, possibly twice, and then said, this isn't going to work out for us. It's not going to be economically feasible in the near future, so we're just going to withdraw that application. So that's the second part of the analysis I was doing for tonight. So if we continue the CUP, that gives us 9 months. What's going to happen in 9 months that's going to be different? Will the fundraising committee be able to do something different in the next 9 months than they've done in the 4 years up to this point? We've only got $14,000 raised in the bank. Promises of in-kind donations don't really count. It's got to be, you know, what do we have that's real? What do we have that's cash? And I think that the thing that so I really have been back and forth on this, and I was listening very closely tonight, and the two things that I heard that I think have pushed me over into the camp of supporting the motion, which is not to deny the CUP, but to withdraw the application, is, first of all, a lot of comment by the skaters and parents and others that they're willing to look at other types of skateboard facilities other than the in-ground. And that would be an interesting thing to pursue, but that would be a different CUP than what we currently have. We'd have to start over again in that process. The second thing was something that Mrs. DeLumy said. I don't know if she's still here or not, but she was talking about sitting down with the other sports and kind of visioning what could be possible in the future in Los Gatos. And that's very intriguing to me because we've got a general plan update coming along with a recreation element in it. And the whole point of doing that is to say, here's where we are now, here is where we would really like to be in this community in terms of providing sports facilities and youth recreation, open space for our young people and for others, and how can we get from here to there. So and that's something that I would really like us to pursue. I was glad to hear her make that comment. So that's kind of where I am. So the motion is to withdraw the application, and I am going to support it because I can't see that 9 months is going to change the economic environment and bring in a lot more money. We might want to pursue doing something as an alternative to the in-ground cement, but that would be a separate CUP process than what we have right now. And in fact, maybe we need to get out of this rut that we are in and start looking at this with a fresh perspective. And that idea of visioning with all of the youth sports is very appealing to me.
Thank you. Looking for any more council comment or discussion? None. Okay, we have on the floor right now a motion by Mr. Przinski to withdraw the application for the conditional use permit.
That would be Mr. Chairman, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Corr.
It would be to withdraw the application for a time extension to the use permit.
Withdraw the application. Thank you for that correction. A motion on the floor by Mr. Przinski to withdraw the application, seconded by Mrs. McNutt. Looking for any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
It passes 3-1. Okay, now we'll now bring our mayor back out of the kitchen. Thank you. Welcome back, Madam Mayor.
There is a winner on this, and that is
That's what I'm doing.
you've closed the door. And, instead of, and you know what would have happened? Had they won this thing, they would have been up here for organizations, and they could have been in this, and it doesn't feel sad with the people who spoke up. And I thought old Leonardo Ferdinand to his little pretense, and to the other side,
May I have my gavel?
They did not play.
Don't throw it.
I'd say. And,
All right, we're now on the items that have been pulled from the consent calendar, which is Agenda Item 3, the Treasurer's Report of January 2008. That was pulled by Mr. Glickman. Mr. Glickman?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. In reading the Treasurer's Report, this is a report on where and how that constantly changing figure of approximately $70 million is invested. And in looking at it, I noticed that a significant amount of it is invested in instruments that involve mortgages. In light of the recent and ongoing, very, very troubling situation that's going on with the mortgage market and everything that's attached to it, I would suggest to my fellow council members, and hope for some support here, to ask staff for perhaps a more in-depth analysis at this point in time, because usually we sort of, well, okay, these are the standard investment vehicles and they're pretty safe and the instruments are okay. The world's changed, and I'm not sure that our money is safe. I'm not saying it isn't, but I am saying that at this point in time, I would ask, again, I hope for council support, to ask staff to take a very close look at how this money is invested, and perhaps even suggest to our finance committee, I think would be the way to start it out, some alternatives in light of the very troubling things that are going on in this particular market. This is all of our money. This is our savings. This is our nest egg. And it isn't just a matter of, oh, well, there's discretionary issues. This is everything. This is where we pay our pensions out of. This is where we pay our equipment out of. This is where we pay our obligations out of. I'm not being alarmist. I'm not saying there's a problem. I'm just suggesting that we ask staff to take a harder look at it in light of what's going on, and perhaps make some recommendations and have a chat with the Finance Committee, and maybe the full council at that point would entertain some discussion.
All right, I am going to have public testimony, but before I do that, does staff want to respond?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, and Councilman Glickman, this is certainly an issue we could work with the town treasurer on preparing. I will highlight that by inference on page 1 of the summary of investment measures, that we show that over half of our portfolio, 53% specifically, is in the 0 to 1 year maturity, and all of our Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are 2 year and greater maturities. So it does constitute, I would surmise from this data, less than 25% of our portfolio at max, probably significantly less. But we can verify that with the town treasurer, review it with the Finance Committee, and provide a report to council. We do adhere to the very conservative investment requirements of the state and regulations as an additional safeguard for public funds.
And Madam Mayor, if I may very quickly comment on that.
Is there, before that, you have a question?
I'm sorry.
Because I'm going to open it up to public testimony.
No, I'm going to hold it. The comment was simply going to be that I in no way was suggesting that staff had not been as diligent as they always have been. It's just the world is changing, and changing very suddenly. And what might have been conservative before, we have to take a harder look at. That's my only comment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Public testimony on this? All right.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I chose to speak on this item because I think the people of this community need to be brought up to date regularly as to the transparency of what's going on with our investment portfolio. Okay? Now, I had a discussion with Mr. Conway, the business manager, 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I remarked, wow, at that time, at the end of November, our portfolio increased by $4 million. Okay? You know what his statement was? Well, that makes up for the leaner months that are ahead. Well, guess what? We're now at the months that are ahead, at least 1 month more. at the end of December, guess what happened? Again, $4 million increase. It is unbelievable. All this hand-wringing by Mr. Wasserman about Netflix might disappear and we'd lose their $1 million. What nonsense. The money flows in like you would not believe. And to spend measly $1,000 of city funds for a skateboard park is an absolute nothing to Los Gatos, based on the facts. Once we get around the lies that were put out and the Nazi-style propaganda by the gruesome threesome, we know that Los Gatos can afford anything within reason for the 4 departments that the state law requires the city to have: police, library, recreation, and the public works. 4 departments that you folks, as a general law city, are obligated under the state laws to furnish reasonable support to, for everybody, not just anybody or a small amount, okay? So, are you doing that? No. And one of the main reasons that you're not doing it is because of the lies you put out, saying we can't afford it. And I'm telling you, the facts tell us, beyond any chance of being wrong, that we can afford it.
Thank you.
Always my pleasure, Madam Mayor.
Want to address us on this issue? Seeing no one, close the public testimony, look to the council. Mr. Brzezinski.
Move to accept the report. Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Mr. Brzezinski, Mr. Glickman, discussion. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I just have a quick comment to make. The town makes about $250,000 to $275,000 a month in interest. If it goes up $4 million in any one given month, it's just a question of what deposits were received at that time and dumped in. There's certain times when more monies are received, same as individuals that have certain times during the year when their property taxes are due twice a year or their income taxes. And I just wanted to clarify that.
All right. Let's see. We have going to go with Mr. Larson first. I see other hands.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I did want to follow up on Vice Mayor Wasserman's comment. Working with the town treasurer, we did add a detailing of the additional receipts in the treasurer's report that document the additional $4 million just from the periodic revenues that the town does receive. January is one of those high months for property tax, business license renewal, in particular being the 2 biggies that are on a sporadic basis that January was a big month for.
Thank you. Mr. Brzezinski.
I'm ready to vote.
All right. Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Great. 12, council matters. Seeing none. 13, manager matters.
Only one brief item that the media has covered extensively. The town suffered a tragic homicide last Friday, the first in 4 years, and I did want to alert the council that the police department has released artist renderings or artist sketches of a suspect as determined from witness interviews, and these sketches are available from the police department, and Chief Seaman is here to answer any additional questions the council may have.
All right. Are those the...
These are the sketches provided by staff from the San Jose Police Department that were loaned to assist our police department in the pursuit of the suspects.
Mr. Manager, can I suggest you put those on the overhead? Thank you.
I haven't done that before.
Oh, that's through the mayor.
As the chief can explain, there's a single, well, presumably a single suspect, 2 renderings from 2 different witness views, very similar in appearance, one with a cap, one without. and these have been released to the media. And anybody with information on the homicide or having seen the suspect are encouraged to call the Los Gatos Montesarino Police Department at 354-8600.
Thank you. Chief Seaman, have there anything to add?
While he's coming up, I will acknowledge the extraordinary work of the Los Gatos Police Department over the weekend and the regular updates provided to the media and the other staff in the organization under Chief Seaman's leadership.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the police department has been working since the report of the assault and the homicide, continue to apply very significant resources and working with other partners. And the example of the sketch using the police artist in San Jose is an example of that partnership. We do ask for the public's help, and cases, even significant cases like this, are made on good witness information. We have clear indication that the person who's responsible for this was possibly seen in town ahead of the incident and possibly after the incident. And so we need people to call us and let us know if they saw anything suspicious and can add to that information we've already developed. And if people would call us at 354-8600 if they have seen someone who matches this description, recognizing that these are renderings from more than one witness. That's why there are subtle differences, but we think there are significant similarities, and we appreciate the public's help.
Thank you. Questions of staff. Mr. Washman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I ask questions? Yes, thank you. Besides here, Chief, where can a member of the public tomorrow go? Is this on the town website? Where else can they look at this if they're thinking about it tomorrow, Wednesday, whenever, after tonight?
We will ensure that tomorrow this is posted on the police department website, but in addition, the local media has received these images, and I fully expect that they'll be available through regular media that people see.
And
go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the police department website, losgatosca.gov, and then follow to the police link, or is there a / something?
You can do that. We also have direct access to lgmspd.org.
Thank you.
We could also put a link on our homepage for the entire town to make accessing the information convenient.
Excellent. Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Glickman.
Let me very, very clearly pose this as a question, not a suggestion. But since you indicated that this person might have been seen in the area, and we have a fairly actively used downtown, would it be appropriate to approach some of the downtown merchants and have that picture where people can see them as they walk North Santa Cruz?
That is a good suggestion, and given that this is new to us in terms of timeliness, we will ensure that it gets the highest distribution.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you both very much, and the meeting is adjourned.